Have you ever had that feeling? That prickling sensation on the back of your neck when you're alone in your house? The unshakable certainty that someone is watching you, even when every rational thought tells you you're alone? I used to dismiss those feelings too, until I discovered the truth, until I found out what, or who, had been living in my parents' house with me all along. Let me take you back to when I was 22. Fresh out of college, trying to save money like every other broke graduate, I moved into the finished basement of my parents' house. It was a sweet setup, really. My own bedroom, a living area with a mini kitchen, even a separate entrance. Sure, it wasn't complete independence, but for the price, free, I couldn't complain. My parents traveled frequently, which meant I often had the whole house to myself. Those were the nights I'd invite friends over, play music too loud, and enjoy that rare feeling of having a place of my own, while still benefiting from home-cooked meals when Mom was around. Little did I know I wasn't the only one enjoying this arrangement. The first incident happened on a Friday night. My parents were away for the weekend, so naturally I had my two closest friends, Anthony and Jay, over to watch the game. We drank, we laughed, we made the kind of noise you can only make when you know no one's around to complain. By 2 a.m., we were all wiped. Anthony and Jay decided to crash on the massive L-shaped couch in the basement, the kind that could comfortably sleep 3 people if needed. I stumbled to my bedroom, locking the door out of pure habit, and passed out almost immediately. Then, at 3:47 a.m., I remember checking my phone. I jolted awake. The basement was pitch black, the kind of darkness that feels heavy. My mouth was dry from drinking, my head slightly fuzzy, but something had pulled me from sleep with sudden urgency. Then I heard it. Creak. A footstep, directly above me in the kitchen. Creak, creak, creak. Slow, deliberate, the measured steps of someone trying to be quiet but unable to avoid the old house's telltale noises. My breath caught in my throat. "Anthony?" I whispered into the darkness. No response. Then came the sound that turned my blood to ice. Click, click, click. The unmistakable sound of my bedroom doorknob twisting. I lay frozen, my mind racing through possible explanations. Maybe Jay was sleepwalking. Perhaps Anthony had gone upstairs to get water and was now confused about which door was mine. Could it be the house settling in some weird way? The twisting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I held my breath for what felt like minutes before finally convincing myself it was nothing. Just my drunk friends being disoriented. Nothing to worry about. The next morning, sunlight streaming through my basement windows made the previous night's fear seem silly. Jay was still asleep on the couch, groggy when I woke him. "Did you try to come into my room last night?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Jay rubbed his eyes. "Dude, I don't even remember getting to the couch. I was wrecked." Anthony had already left for work. I texted him, but he swore he'd slept like a rock on the couch until his early alarm. See? Nothing to worry about. Just my imagination running wild. The next night, Saturday, I came home late after a long day out with other friends. I was sober, tired, and ready to crash. After a quick snack, I washed up and climbed into bed, putting on some mindless TV to wind down. That's when I heard it again. This time, there was no alcohol to blame, no friends in the house, just me, alone in the basement. Or so I thought. The footsteps were heavier this time, more confident, moving from the kitchen area to stopping right above my bedroom. I muted the TV. My hands began to shake, something heavy being set down. A chair moving? Then, the sound that made my stomach drop. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps on my bedroom door. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my temples. Cold sweat broke out across my back. Every muscle tensed, torn between the instinct to flee and the paralyzing fear of what might be waiting on the other side of that door. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands, texting every group chat I had. Is anyone in the house right now? Did someone come over? Please answer. This isn't funny. The responses came quickly, but not the ones I wanted. Dude, it's 2 a.m. You okay? No one's there, man. The doorknob began to turn again, more forcefully this time. I dialed 911, my voice barely above a whisper. There's someone in my house. I'm locked in my bedroom. Please hurry. The dispatcher kept me on the line as I crawled to the farthest corner of my room, grabbing the metal bat I kept by my bed. My breathing came in short, ragged gasps as I strained to hear any sound from beyond the door. 10 agonizing minutes passed. Then, salvation, at my window. A flashlight beam cutting through the blinds. I carefully unlatched the window, thank God for ground-level basement windows, and handed the officer my keys. Side door, I whispered. Please be careful. I stayed crouched by the window until I heard the officers enter. Their flashlights cut through the darkness as they cleared the basement. Behind the couch, in the laundry room, every possible hiding spot. Nothing. We moved upstairs, the officers leading with their weapons drawn. The main floor was equally empty. Then, my parents' bedroom. The lead officer pushed the door open slowly. For a moment, silence. Then, police! Show me your hands! A scramble, a thud, a guttural scream that didn't sound human. From my position in the hallway, I saw the officers drag out a gaunt, wild-eyed man. His clothes were filthy, his hair matted, his fingernails black with dirt. But worst of all were his eyes. When they locked onto mine, they burned with pure, unadulterated hatred. As they handcuffed him, one officer shone a flashlight under the bed. What we saw made my stomach churn. Empty food wrappers, a makeshift bed of stolen blankets, several of my missing t-shirts, and worst of all, a notebook filled with disturbingly accurate details about my daily routine. The police later told me he was a known squatter who'd been breaking into homes in the area. No violent history, just a homeless man seeking shelter. But that explanation did little to calm my nerves. Because here's what they couldn't tell me. How long had he been living in my parents' house? How many times had he watched me sleep? What might have happened if I hadn't locked my door that first night? I moved out the next week. Couldn't sleep in that house another night. Even now, years later, I still check every closet, every shadow, every space under the bed. Because the truth is, monsters don't always live in stories or under bridges. Sometimes they live much closer to home. Sometimes they're already inside, watching, waiting, turning the doorknob night after night. Lock your doors, check your windows. And if you hear a noise you can't explain, trust your instincts. They might just save your life.
There's a special kind of silence in the deep woods. Not the peaceful quiet you imagine, but a heavy, watchful silence. Like the trees themselves are holding their breath. For 5 years, I thought I was alone in my secluded cabin. I was wrong. And by the time I realized something was watching me from the darkness, it was already inside. 5 years ago, I left the noise and chaos of the city behind. Found myself a little slice of heaven in upstate New York. A rustic cabin surrounded by nothing but endless forest. The nearest neighbor, miles away, the only sounds, wind through the pines, the occasional loon call echoing across the lake. It was perfect. I spent my days fishing on the glassy lake behind the property, my evenings drinking beer on the sprawling deck, watching the sunset paint the trees in gold and crimson. The isolation never bothered me. In fact, I craved it until 2 weeks ago, until the scratching started. It began with a simple sound, the snap of a twig in the darkness beyond my deck. Normal enough in the woods, probably just a deer, maybe a raccoon. But then it happened again, the next night, and the next. The sounds changed, evolved. First, it was just twigs snapping, then leaves rustling in deliberate patterns. Then, the scratching. I'll never forget that first night I heard it. A slow, deliberate scritch, scritch, scritch coming from the side of the house, right beneath the spare bedroom window. My beer bottle froze halfway to my lips. This wasn't random. This wasn't an animal. The rhythm was all wrong. Too measured, too intentional, like someone running fingernails down the wooden siding. I convinced myself it was nothing, a branch in the wind, a particularly ambitious squirrel, anything but what my primal instincts screamed it was. Something alive, something aware, testing the boundaries of my home. For 3 nights, I played this game with myself, hearing the sounds, explaining them away, ignoring the growing pit in my stomach every time dust fell. Then came the tapping, coming from the same damned window. That's when I grabbed my flashlight and crept through the dark cabin, my pulse pounding in my ears. The floorboards groaned under my weight, each creak feeling like a betrayal. When I yanked back the curtain, the beam of my light revealed nothing. Just the endless trees swaying in the moonlight. But the window ledge, clear as day in the thin layer of dust on the outside, still human fingerprints. The next week was a blur of sleepless nights and jumpy days. Every sound made me flinch. The cabin no longer felt like a sanctuary, it felt like a cage with something lurking just beyond the walls. I started noticing small things. Food missing from the pantry. Doors left slightly ajar. That constant oppressive feeling of being watched. Then I found the cloth. In the spare bedroom closet, the one I never used, a scrap of dark fabric caught on a nail. Rough, frayed, reeking of sweat and earth. Not mine. Never mine. The final night plays in my mind like a broken film reel. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. That familiar tap, tap, tap 3. Pulling back the curtain to see him, a shadowy figure standing just beyond the tree line. Not hiding, not running, just watching. Tall, gaunt, face obscured by darkness, but I could feel his eyes on me. The 911 call was a blur. The operator's voice sounded miles away as new sounds erupted through the house. Heavy footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the spare bedroom door opening, labored breathing just outside my bedroom. I ran, barefoot, jacketless, into the freezing night. The last thing I saw before the trees swallowed me whole, the flicker of flashlight beams through my cabin windows as police arrived. The official report said, no signs of forced entry, no suspect found. But they didn't search the woods, didn't check the old hunting blind half a mile into the trees where I later found a nest of stolen food wrappers, my missing shirts, pages upon pages of notes documenting my routines. I never went back for my things, never spent another night in that cabin. Because here's the truth they don't tell you about isolation. When you're miles from help, no one can hear you scream. And the things that live in the deep woods, they know that better than anyone. Lock your doors, check your windows, and if you hear tapping in the night, run. Don't wait to see what's making the sound, because by then it's already seen you. There's a special kind of fear that comes from hearing your front door knob rattle in the dead of night. But what if the person trying to get in wasn't a stranger? What if it was someone you were supposed to trust? This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't hiding in the shadows. They're sitting across from you at family dinners. It was 2008. I was 15 years old, home alone with my black lab Abby while my parents were out at the casino. Just your typical Friday night, instant messaging friends, watching YouTube videos, enjoying that rare teenage freedom of having the house to myself. The first sign something was wrong came around 11 p.m. Abby started barking, not her usual squirrel in the yard. Bark. This was different, sharp, insistent, the kind of bark that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I peered through the living room windows into the inky blackness of our driveway. Only one car. Parents weren't home yet. Probably just a loud car on the main road, I told myself. But then the noises started changing. First, it was just Abby's barking. Then, knocking. Faint at first, like someone testing how much noise they, could make. Then louder. More insistent. Then came the sound that turned my blood to ice. The unmistakable sound of someone trying to pick our basement door lock. Now, our basement entrance wasn't easy to find. Tucked under the deck, hidden behind overgrown bushes, you'd either need to know exactly where it was, or be determined to get inside. Abby went berserk. My sweet, gentle lab suddenly transformed into a snarling protector, charging down the stairs with a growl I'd never heard before. I stood paralyzed in the hallway, listening to the sounds. Below, the creak of the basement door, Abby's ferocious barking, then silence. Complete, deafening silence. That's when I grabbed the landline phone. This was 2008, remember? And locked myself in my parents' closet with my dad's handgun, fully prepared to dial 911. The front door suddenly swung open. "We're home," my mom called out. Relief flooded through me until I saw their confused faces. "Why are you holding the gun?" my dad asked. As I recounted the night's events, I watched the color drain from their faces. My dad immediately grabbed his flashlight and gun to search the property. Nothing. No broken windows. No forced entry. Just nothing. The next afternoon, a knock at the door sent me diving behind the couch. It was Uncle Pete. My skin crawled just seeing him there. He'd always been off. The kind of relative who stood too close, asked inappropriate questions, made everyone's stomach twist with discomfort. As I eavesdropped from the kitchen, I heard the words that explained everything. "I tried to stop by last night to drop this off, but no one was home, I guess." The gift was a thank you card for helping his daughter with softball. But the real message was clear. He knew exactly when my parents would be gone. He tried multiple entry points when no one answered. He didn't call first because he wanted to catch me alone. My dad slammed the door in his face that day. We never spoke to Uncle Pete again. But to this day, I still wonder what would have happened if Abby hadn't been there to scare him off. Why did he need to deliver that card at 11 p.m.? And most terrifying of all, how many other nights had he watched our house, waiting for the perfect moment? We like to think danger comes from strangers in dark alleys, but sometimes it wears the face of someone you're supposed to trust. Abby passed away years ago, but I'll always be grateful for her that night. Because while I may never know what Uncle Pete truly wanted, I know one thing for certain. That wasn't the first time he'd tried to get in, and if not for a protective black lab and a well-timed poker night, it might not have been the last. Lock your doors, trust your instincts, and pay attention to your dog's warnings, because sometimes they can see the monsters we pretend aren't there.